In this lesson, lesson 24, we're going to be talking about something called drop caps. That's short for drop capital. We're going to talk about borders, and we're going to deal with shading. So we're going to show you how to add those drop caps and what exactly that is. We're going to show you how to add a border to a paragraph, which we touched on in the last lesson, and then we're going to add shading to the document. To do this, we're going to need to open a file. That file is going to be found in lesson 24, specifically page 311. And we're going to open this doc file on page 311. We're going to enable the editing on that file. And we're going to save this file to our dated folder, adding our initials to the end of this file. In this lesson, we're going to be taking a look at what a drop cap is. You've all seen a drop cap, you just may not have realized what a drop cap was. When you were little, you probably had fairy tales read to you, and when you think of the fairy tales, often it says once upon a time, and remember that letter O, how it was very large? That is a drop cap. It's where the first letter is very large in a paragraph or a sentence. And so what we're going to be doing is taking a look at how to place drop caps in our document. And we're going to start this with the lions portion here. So I'm going to click over here with lions. Now, a couple mistakes that people make with drop caps: you don't want to do this. People will select the text, or they'll select just the L, and because they want to make that particular letter a bit larger. You really don't need to do that, and that can lead to problems. And so the best thing to do is simply to click in front of the line or at the beginning of the line where you want the drop cap to happen. Placing the drop cap is relatively simple. It's a feature available on the Insert tab. So we go to Insert, and there's the option over here that says Drop Cap. Almost every drop cap that I see is done using this dropped option, but you can use this one called in margin, and that's what the first option that they're going to do here is they're going to do this in margin option. And what that's going to do is it's going to move that L of lions out into the margin of this particular paragraph or this particular line. Now that the drop cap is made, notice it puts it in a text box. I'm going to simply click away from that drop cap, deselecting that text box. Now we're going to do another drop cap, and this is going to be done to this zebra line. So once again, I'm going to click in front of the Z. I'm not selecting anything. I'm just putting my cursor, my insertion point, if you will, in front of the Z. And we're going to go back to this drop cap button again. This time, however, although we could use the dropped option, I want to make a few other changes to it. Just pointing at the dropped option, you can see what it will look like. We're going to come down here though and go into the drop cap options. What this does is it does let me choose the dropped option versus the in margin option. And by the way, if you're ever asked to insert a drop cap and it doesn't specify which one, always use the dropped option. Do not use the in margin option. The font that we're going to pick in this particular case is going to be a font called Algerian. So I'm clicking the drop down on the list of fonts here, and I'm going to pick the Algerian font. So I can choose the font that's going to be used for that capital letter Z. And the other thing we can do is we can change the lines to drop. The default setting is to drop it 3 lines. And in this case, we're going to bump that up to 5 lines, meaning that I want this Z to take up 5 lines in this paragraph. One thing you do need to be aware of when you're doing drop caps is if you do have a short paragraph, you don't want to exceed the number of lines that are actually in the paragraph. I'm going to click OK. The letter Z is now made larger. It is in the Algerian font, and if you count the number of lines that are here, you'll see that it does indeed drop for 5 different lines in that paragraph. So again, in review, on the Insert tab, we can look at the drop cap option. We can either use the dropped option or the in margin option, or if you want to customize, go into the drop cap settings and customize accordingly. The next thing we're going to deal with deals with borders and shading. For this, I'm going to select this very first line, the Safari with Voyager, and we are going to add a border around this paragraph. I say around, we're actually going to place the border specifically underneath this paragraph, but we're also going to include some of a fill as well. And so for this, we're going to go to the Home tab. On the Home tab, we've used this Borders button before. In fact, we used it just recently in the last lesson that we looked at in order to create a top border. This time we're going to create a bottom border, but rather than choosing the bottom option, I want to pick some settings for this. In other words, I want to add some color to it. So we're going to come down and choose the Borders and Shading dialog box so I can be a little more specific with what I want to do here. Specifically, what we're going to do is we are going to choose a orange bottom border. So we're going to pick the color here, and I'm going to come down here to the list of standard colors, and we're going to click orange here. I'm going to scroll down and find the thick and thin line. This one right here, the one that has the thick line on the top and the thin line at the bottom. Okay, the thick on the top, thin on the bottom, the orange color. And if it didn't already set this to 3 points, go ahead and set the width to 3 points. Now, when you made this change, you may see from the preview here that it's putting it all the way around the paragraph. As I stated a moment ago, I don't really want this all the way around. I just want it on the bottom edge. So I'm going to click on these 3 edges, and that turns off the border on those. Alternatively, I could have used these buttons here. This button would have changed the top, turned it on or off. The left turned it on or off, and the right turning it on or off. So I've turned off the top, left, and right, allowing just the bottom border. And the other thing that we're going to do while we're here is we're also going to adjust a shading. Basically, what I want to do is I want to create a background color to the text. So in this same dialog box, we've got our Borders button. We've got our Shading tab. I said button. It really is a Borders tab. I'm going to go to the Shading tab. And here we are going to pick a shading fill. Instead of no color, they want to pick a shading of gray. Specifically, they're going to pick a gray 25% background 2 style. A gray 25% background 2 . There we go. Gray 25% background 2. So I'm going to pick that shading. And what you're going to see is that it's going to not only put the orange border at the bottom, but it's going to provide a gray background. I'm going to click OK. I now have the setting that I was looking for, the orange line at the bottom, the gray in the underneath or in the background. The last thing I want to do with this, just for visual sake, is I'd like to center the text so that it looks more like a paper that I might want to turn in. So I've centered the Safari with Voyager. I'm going to save my work, and that brings us to a close of this lesson. So you can go ahead and close this file. In this lesson, we basically dealt with three things. We showed you how to add a drop cap to your document. We showed you how to add borders to your paragraph. And then we looked at shading, which is the background color of your paragraph settings.